It is that time of year once more when the Intelligent Money British GT Championship comes for its Donington decider. Last round of the championship is here on a damp Donington Park Grand Prix circuit. Qualifying is about to get underway. GT3 cars first of all, and Q1 is ready for business. It is a wet, slippery, cold circuit. It is the AM driver who will do Q1. It's almost the worst way round this. Great value for us watching, but for the AM driver, not much fun on a cold road, and very shortly the cars will be out on track. David Addison and Joe Osborne trackside. We'll come to Joe in a moment. Down in the pit lane is the man with the finger on the pulse of the weather here, and also what people are doing on tyres. We can say good afternoon to Bryn Lucas.
Thank you very much, David. Yeah, finger on the pulse, it is dry, and a lot of slicks are going out on the tyres, on the cars at the moment, so that's interesting. Bit of a dry line. James Cottingham has just left the pits behind me. Ian Loggy is just heading out onto track now, and I'm joined by Philip Ellis, who is the driver who's taking over from Johnny Adam for this weekend alongside James Cottingham. Now, Phil, you've got the maybe unenviable task of trying to help James secure the title this weekend.
Yeah, I mean, it's a nice task to have, for sure. It's a bit sad for Johnny, of course, that he can't be here to actually clinch the championship together with James, as he had a great season so far. And I'm just here to try and top it off and actually give him the title. And you know, it's unfortunate that it's only going to be one name on the trophy. But yeah, it's a great part to be in. You know, the team has done a great job so far, has welcomed me very well to the UK, and loving every bit so far.
Very tricky for you though, because James is so used to Johnny's car setup. They work very closely together. How have you developed the car with James this weekend, given that you've got such limited experience around Donington Park as well?
To be honest, we did very little. I think what Johnny and Adam have, Johnny and James have, I think was very comfortable for James to drive and to perform in. So we decided not to touch it too much, and basically have James perform at his best, and he's doing great so far the last couple of days in testing. And I think that's what you need in this championship, to have the AM qualify well, be comfortable in the race car, and then as the finisher, we just do the rest.
Well, you're looking very, very confident. James is looking quite nervous, I have to say, but he's out there right now. Over to you, David, to talk us through it.
Bryn, thanks very much. A quick word about Philip Ellis. Mercedes factory driver. He's Anglo-German-Swiss. He's never raced in the UK before. He's only been to the UK, he reckons, about 3 times in his life. Never mind, he's not raced at Donington. He's not raced in British GT. He's never raced anywhere in the UK. Now, Joe Osborne, these conditions, great for us. Hell on wheels for the AMs, but they've all gone out, I think, on slicks, haven't they?
Yeah, apart from John Seal in the Fox Lambo, everyone else is on slick. So you can see that dry line just coming. Good illustration of it there. Turn in. There are still damp patches covering the whole circuit. For example, here to Hollywood, look, there isn't a dry bit. Darren Leung's trying to find the grip. That's easy flat in the dry, but the damp, that is really tricky. These guys have got to really work hard at this point. We're hoping to kind of see him in the 26s. That's a good dry time. 34. You see Beechdean coming in, putting another set of slicks on. So he's taking slicks off. Maybe they went out on an old set and want to come in for a hot, brand new set. You can see they're new, they've got stickers on it. Maybe the 67 McLaren doing the same thing in the background, sorry, but we've only got 7 minutes remaining, so by the time they've done an outlap, 2, possibly 3 flyers. That's going to be hard for Andrew Howard to find where the grip is at.
One of the things drivers are saying about the circuit this year is that the track is a lot grippier since it's been resurfaced. So even in these conditions, you have a lot more grip than you would have done. Not enough grip for John Ferguson, though, who has been off the road. And he will rally across his way back onto the circuit. So at least the good news is that he's managed to keep it going. And there, with damage on the front left, is the McLaren 67 heading back into its pit box of Simon Orange.
I wonder if that's the tyre stack at the chicane. There's a big tyre stack on the left-hand side. Go on board with Chris Froggatt or Kevin Say. So I can't see which one looks like Chris Froggatt with the side, but it should be Kevin Say. You can see how slippy it is. Trying to get a feel of it.
They got hit.
Yeah, so that was the damage. So Simon Orange is obviously keen to get going, and it's an interest. I have to say, I haven't really seen that. It was quite obvious he was going slow, as we see Mike Price spinning it around. So you would agree that the conditions are tricky potentially?
They're on the tricky side, certainly, aren't they? So quite a lot of the AMs struggling. Slick tyres, cold track, yes, those slicks will start to work when you've got the temperature in them, but it's getting the temperature in that's the problem. And right now, John Seal there, the oldest driver we think in the history of British GT, at 74 years of age, is the quickest driver, largely because he's keeping out of strife at the moment, 1 minute 37.8. Ian Logie, Darren Leung behind. We've not yet touched on the championship situation that we need to. It is James Cottingham versus the BMW of Darren Leung and Dan Harper. 13 points between them. Mercedes with the advantage coming into the weekend, and James Cottingham is currently fourth, but John Seal here going really well.
Yeah, the only car on wets. When you're the only one doing so different, you're automatically wrong until you're right. And I think Fox here, because it's a one-off race, they've probably gone conservative and gone, you know, let's go on wets and see. But if you were everyone else right now, to be 3.2 seconds quicker, I'd be really tempted to box and get some wets on it. Maybe it's just too cold. The slicks look like they should be the right tyre, in my opinion, but we're going to see this pan out. But he's now 4.5 seconds quicker. It's not even close, is it? And we're seeing really experienced drivers going off. As we see the Greystone car off again, under double wave yellows, no one can improve in sector 1 now. Those marshals doing a great job pushing a heavy car uphill on damp grass. But this is, Howard's gone for wets. So as a quick illustration, the Pirelli slick has Pirelli written on the tyre wall in big yellow letters. The wet does not. So if you don't see any writing, like you can see that spinning on the rear, that's a slick. If it's all black, that's a wet. So Andrew Howard leaves with 4 minutes remaining. At the moment, you say he's going to be second, but Cottingham's, well,
that might have looked worse than it was because the camera might have foreshortened it, but that is not a place you want to be. They've got him off the grass, but now a 3-point turn to get that in the right direction, and Andrew Howard's going to have to take to the grass in avoidance.
Going to fill the radiator from the grass as well.
So far, so good. Peter Daly, the race director, heart in mouth, thinking, I'll give him time, I'll give him time. Mike Price also doesn't want to be there, and he is going to get going. Much sighing of relief, but still, John Seal on those wets, 2 seconds quicker than anybody else, and we've only got 3 minutes and change on the clock.
It's looking really good for them. This is the second place car, championship leader Cottingham, doing the best job of the slick runners at the moment. Well, what's he got? He's not quicker in sector 1 because of the yellow flags, about to break the beam in sector 2. If this isn't purple, I don't think he's got a chance of catching Seal on those wet tyres. 1.9 seconds off Seal's sector 2. They're really struggling. I think this is going to throw a massive curveball for the teams. And what do the pros do? The pros are better in these conditions proportionally to the AMs, we know that. But you're seeing the car 2.4 seconds slow. He's trying to find some space. He's got 3 minutes. He's now probably just conceding only 2 more flyers, not 3. For a qualifying session of a championship decider, I don't think we needed much more spice, but we've definitely been given it. You see people boxing for wets, definitely on that first Lamborghini, and it looks like Barwell had to push that in. The teams probably weren't prepped to do a tyre change mid-quali.
Double stacked, weren't they? So they've got to get 78 now. Sean Balf's car onto wets, slithering out of the pit lane, number 72, which is Mark Sampson, who was off the road in FP2. Right, so John Seal still looks like a hero because he's still going faster. Look in the sectors. So yes, wet's the way to go. And all of those people that thought that slicks was going to be the answer early on now caught short. But it's the aggregated time. So this is where the pro is going to have to work their magic to haul the disadvantage down, if you like, up the order.
Yeah, but John Seal's teammate Abby Eaton, we know, is a rapid driver in her own right. So she's got a 2.4 second buffer now over all the other pros to pull it on pole.
But Andrew Howard has now done the absolute best in the first sector in the Aston Martin. So number 97 Aston now could be on for provisional pole out of Q1. A fascinating session. It's amazing what weather can do. I think we've said this quite a bit in motor racing this year, whether it's been in GT racing or touring cars, you name it. The weather gods can always liven things up. Now, what can John Seal do? It was good in the first sector. He's a little bit down in sector 2. The lap time when he goes through is still the best of the session, a 1:36.269. But Andrew Howard here, absolutely storming along. He's been off the road. We saw that having to avoid the Mercedes. But Andrew, one of the drivers that was saying back here in May about how much grippier the new track surface was, and it seems to play into the hands of the Aston Martin.
Yeah, we saw it fastest in free practice 1 and 2 with Ross Gunn behind the wheel in the 34. So Andrew Howard here is going to be close, but I just can't believe the crossover point isn't further up the road towards slicks. And as an arrogant pro, I'd be looking at this going, I think I still want slicks for my qualifying, even after all the information I'm seeing Darren Leung up to P2 now, 1.8 off. Andrew Howard goes pole by 0.3 of a second. So the gap is diminishing from wets to slicks, but it's still, I think it's just so cold. Yes, the track grip is high, but I think, like you said, the slick tyre is not firing up and they're not able to get the grip from it.
So Andrew Howard has gone top of the times by 0.3 of a second from John Seal. Ian Loggy, the outgoing champion, number 1 Mercedes, is third. You can see there's a dry line, but it's a cold track surface. So the fascination is going to be in what people do next, because the pros will get in. Now, where is Darren Leung? He is 4th. Significantly, he is ahead of James Cottingham, which is pretty good as far as a grid position is concerned, especially given that Philip Ellis doesn't know Donington.
Yeah, definitely. It's going to be a hard thing for him to jump into that car and go and look for grip where he doesn't know where to look. They've done very few dry laps. Being hit into the pit wall there for Mark Smith. That's probably going to go red. Yeah, red flag. Wise decision there. That's a lot of damage. I think that's probably done the chassis. The way the McLaren is, there's some longies that stick out the front of that carbon tub. That would have tweaked that. Longies.
Longies.
I always thought they were just legs, but they're always called long. I've never questioned why they're called that. When you're a driver working with a factory like I was at McLaren, when you hear it, you go, yeah, longies, makes sense.
Yeah.
I remember why they're called longies. Yeah. Session will not restart, so what does that leave us? Andrew Howard on pole, who was purple in sector 2. John Seal, Loggy, Leung, Cottingham is P5, so our championship rivals next to each other, 4th and 5th. Mark Smith, who caused the red flag, actually in 6th position. We're going to get a replay of this. Ferguson off in the background. Oh, he's so unfortunate.
Wow.
Ian Campbell had a moment, then came in the pits. I don't know if that was he was having a moment and still coming to the pits. Mark Smith had nowhere to go. No. Ferguson off in the background. You had 3 cars all having their own moment, and that is a big hit. The positive news, being very selfish, is there shouldn't be any barrier damage because that is solid concrete with earth behind it. But
there's a positive.
Yeah, that is a big hit.
It is, you're right.
I talk about it as an importance of timing, because the pros, if there's barrier damage, you go, oh, we've got 15 minutes for the barrier to be repaired. Maybe it will be slicks, but I think it's going to be a really quick turnaround. I would have thought we're going to be green within 5 minutes or so. You can actually see the Sky Tempesta car didn't get back out after getting hit by Orange on his outlap. So Kevin Say's not done a lap time. So those 2 cars we know are going to be last, even with the aggregate of the pro. So those 2 McLarens are going to have a hard fight, and obviously Martin Plowman, the teammate of the paddock car.
Now let's go to the pit lane, because Bryn has got Dan Harper with him. There you can see 91 BMW. Dan is with Bryn, and he can give his thoughts of Q2.
Well, Darren is in the pits now and looks like a tyre change for you. It's very tricky out there because there's a dry line, but we're talking temperatures. The tyre's not coming up to temp at all.
Yeah, I think that's the problem. There's still a lot of wet patches there, but in certain areas it is dry, so it's just in that very tricky in-between stage, and especially for these guys, Darren, it's just the worst you can ask for, so he did a very good job to bring it back. We've seen 2, 3, 4 cars off in the grass, one unfortunately crashing, so we're back in the pits and we're there, so that's the main thing.
Very quickly, wet tyres for you, or are you going to stay on the slicks? What's the thinking?
We're still debating. It'll be a choice about 2 seconds before I go down the pit lane, so we'll just have to wait and see.
Cheers, Dan. Thank you.
Thank you.
So Dan Harper gets set to get on board number 91 BMW, and at the end of Q1, it is Andrew Howard the fastest by 0.3 of a second from John Seal. Ian Loggy 3rd ahead of Darren Leung. James Cottingham 5th. So there are your 2 title battlers in GT3, 4th and 5th. But it's where they are at the end of the next session that's going to be more important. 6th is Mark Smith with now a very badly damaged car that will prevent Martin Plowman from going out today. Miguel Ramos sharing with F3 winner Johnny Edgar 7th ahead of Sean Bell, Morgan Tilbrook and then Mark Radcliffe. Richard Neary 11th. Ian Campbell, who was the one that sort of triggered that by bouncing off the Mark Smith McLaren 12th ahead of Mark Sanson, Mike Price after his spin, then John Ferguson and Kevin Say and Simon Orange never got a time in. Mike Price under investigation for an unsafe rejoin. Well, he was kind of pushed into that by the marshals. It was, you know, he had to turn the car. There's a limited amount of lock, but anyway, that's going to be looked at to see whether there's anything that could have been done differently. For 10 minutes, not quite 10 minutes in the end, it was a fascinating part 1, but now what do you do? If you're a pro, what do you do? Do you go onto wets or do you go onto slicks?
I think you do your outlap on wets and you go, I can do a time on this, maybe bank a lap on the wets, come in after your first fly, probably going to be 6.5 minutes remaining And if you think the slicks were right, then try it. If you go, you know what, I can't see it going slicks, you're already on the right tyre. I think if you do it the other way around and start on the slicks, you'll never know what time you could have done on the wets until it's too late, really. That would be the conservative way. If you're someone that's not in the championship hunt, I think you start on slicks. You maybe wait until everyone's left so you can drop hot tyres straight out the oven. I'd be talking to my tyre guy and I'd be like, let's get this oven hot. They're all running these sort of diesel or gas, sometimes propane heaters into a big tyre tent. And you can get the tyres up to pretty much any temperature you want, 120, 130 degrees. That's normally too hot. They're normally 80 to 90, but you might want that deficit of temperature to be too high for once rather than too low, because you can just get going straight away. I'm amazed how much of a tough call it is still. That's the hard bit for the teams trying to work it out, and they've probably gone to a more of a dry setup as well than they thought. So I think it'll be a bit stiffer. Maybe some of the teams will be trying to soften off the roll bars to try and give the cars some grip, but super tough for all of the teams, especially the championship contenders.
Just fast forward to tomorrow while we've got a moment, because obviously with the car being retrieved, we'll have a moment or two's delay. James Cottingham trying to win a championship. Now, how does he go into this weekend? Is it about keeping out of trouble and banking points, or is it best to try and win from the front? Because some people say the danger in keeping out of trouble is that you sort of let somebody by, and before you know what's happened, you've fallen so far back, you've actually hurt yourself. Yeah,
you get that sort of butterfly snowball effect of negative energy. I think you've just got to treat it like every other race. You're fortunate enough to be in the championship hunt because you've been fast and because you've been good. So don't change anything. Don't suddenly double guess yourself and overthink it. I think that's where you've got to go. Otherwise, you can get into a world of hurt very quickly.
Now, let's hear from Andrew Howard then, because he was at the top of the times after Q1. He's with Bryn.
It's all about tyres, isn't it, Andrew, at the moment? People are saying slicks is the way to go. What's your thinking?
Well, for me, I think we just proved wets were right. We went out on the slicks, but the slicks were given a massive vibration, and we swapped sets, and we got a second vibration, which is just saying it's not slicks. The problem then is you've got one lap on wets. We had scrub wet, so we were ready, but I had to overtake on various people, having gone off the grass as well. So it's quite an eventful 10 minutes or whatever. And then it's just a shame the red flag, because we're another 2 seconds up on the next lap. So transition-wise, pros, hey, listen, good set of slicks, and you might be okay. But
so are you thinking that slicks is the way forward for Ross as well, or is he just going to do his own thing? What's the thought process, and what can you do this weekend?
Well, if it's wet and if it's miserable weather, then we've had pace all practice. Typical Donington, though, it's never going to leave you in peace, is it? It always puts you on angst, and anyone running for a championship, I total sympathy for them. For me at the moment, for an AM, I think wets are still the way forward. I think you've got the extra grip and it gives you that confidence, whereas the slicks are just, there's too much on the track, and if you are not precise. Listen, up to them. That's why we have engineers and pros, isn't it?
Absolutely. It's not called the Donington Decider for nothing. Thanks, Andrew. Cheers.
Not a problem.
Double champion Andrew Howard, fastest in Q1. Joe, talk us around this.
So this is the lap that put him on pole position. So we know he's on wet tyres. He's on his third set of tyres in a 10-minute qualifying session, which I think is a new record. We're going to see this traffic he's talking about. A car leaving Pex, it looks like one of the Barwell Lamborghinis, I think. You can see the dry line, so he's happy with the car there. He picks the throttle up. Can't hear any traction control, so he's got good traction. What's he going to do through the first part of Craners? Sounds pretty flat. Probably have a little lift. Sounds like a full lift into the left. Going to get it back over to the left-hand side for the old hairpin. Gets the car in. Quite positive with the steering input, so he's obviously happy he's got good front-end grip. Real strong trait of this Aston Martin GT3 car. You see Mark Sansom there on an outlap. He's trying to get past a McLaren in front of him. Is that Radcliffe in the Optimum car? I think it is in the 27. So he's probably already lost 5 or 6 tenths with that one overtake. He's got to do another one now. That McLaren on the slicks, you can see how tentative Mark Radcliffe was having to be there. So we've probably lost 1.2 seconds. So I actually do believe, Andrew, that he was 2 seconds up on his next flyer just from that traffic. So this is his first look at the track as well. You can see the braking zone here for chicane patchy, a little bit drier towards the end, dry line through the left, dry line through the right. Again, that's why I'm surprised the slick guys weren't able to get the time, because normally if you had this sort of track and you were on the wrong tyre, the slick should already be looking 2 to 3 seconds quicker, and ultimately around Donington, if you had wets on a dry track, you're probably 8 or 9 seconds difference as a negative to the wets. But just the car looks great on these wet tyres, and every time we saw an outboard, it didn't look good. So I'm amazed how good the traction is in that Aston Martin. And I think that's what's given Andrew the confidence, and that's why he's on pole position.
Provisionally, Ross Gunn is going to be behind the wheel of number 97 next, and it will be the combined time of the two. You can see John Ferguson's somewhat muddy Mercedes there, number 15, that Raffaele Marcello will take over. So we've had a look on board of the 2.5 mile Donington Grand Prix circuit, and just to remind you, it has that blast down towards Redgate Corner, onto the top of the Craner curves, down towards the old hairpin, climb up to McLean's, keep on climbing up towards Coppice, and then at the end of Starkey Straight onto the Grand Prix loop with the Melbourne hairpin and Goddard's to bring you up towards the timing line. Right, what about the thoughts of championship leader James Cottingham?
You know, I've just interrupted James giving Freddie some pointers about the track and the conditions out there. It looks pretty tough. There's been a lot of people spending time in the gravel and off on the grass as well. For yourself, it didn't go quite to plan, but 5th place, 7/10 off, you know, your title chaser. It's not too bad. Damage limitations.
Yeah, I mean, it's over to Philip now just to do the best he can. You know, a bit like last year, this quali session was always going to be really tricky. We went out in slicks and it was super, super slippery at the beginning there, and you know, just that sort of that edge, that balance where it goes from grip to none. It's so sudden and such a shock in these cars when it's at that point. So it was difficult, and I was just trying to find a gap, and I saw that Andrew had been in, so I don't know whether he went from slicks to wets or the other way around, but just sort of let him come past. Had a really good gap, and actually on the last lap there, coming out of the last corner Coppice onto the back straight, you know, I was up on the time that's in the dash, which is quicker than the pole time. So I know we were on for one, and damn red flag. So is what it is.
Andrew was definitely slicks to wets. He said it was perfect out there. But tell me a little bit about your teammate, because we spoke to him a few minutes ago at the start of your session, and he was saying, you know, he's going to give it his all. Very difficult position for him to be in, because, you know, it's for him to lose really and you to win. So how do you approach this one this weekend with a driver that is very, very experienced but not experienced at Donington Park?
Well, he's very experienced at the Nürburgring, so I think the conditions are fairly similar. And look, I've been super impressed with how professional he's been the whole weekend, right from the word go. And he will do the job that a Mercedes factory driver will need to do, and that's, you know, bank a good lap. It won't be an average lap, it'll be a good lap, and work from there. And he'll do everything he can to build up from there again. You know, I just hope that we can start the race from a safe position, because as we know, anything behind the front row of the grid is not safe. Not that the front row is, but that has always been the aim for the whole season, is to try and start every race in the front row of the grid. I think sadly that's out of sight today, but we'll just do the best we can and hopefully have a trouble-free, safe race.
You don't have to win this weekend to win the championship. It's a very fine line between success and failure. We wish you all the best, James. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
So James Cottingham then, who in super slow-mo looked like this coming through the S's. And race director Peter Daly has said he wants at least one wheel in contact with the racetrack, so you can use the curb, but you've got to have at least one of the tyres, one of the wheels on the black bit through the S's. There, James Cottingham with the road to himself. It wasn't always like that during that session, because as we'd seen, it did get a bit crowded at times, quite a bit of contact for a number of them. And this was how it looked on board, with quite a bit of traffic around him.
Try and get past Sansom here as into the Melbourne hairpin. You can see as soon as he gets onto that wet bit, struggling for grip. Samson Bayfair gives him that line, but this is all in a qualifying session where ideally you don't see another car because you just want to punch in your ultimate lap time. But he's trying to find space, and then the red flag. It's been really tough for him so far. I think he's staying calm at the moment.
Yeah, Philip Ellis, as we've been saying, is the man with the pressure on. Let's just, seeing that we haven't had a chance yet, just explain the championship situation. 13 points between James Cottingham and Johnny Adam, and the car of Darren Leung and Dan Harper behind. Johnny Adam is not here because he is away on European Le Mans Series duty, so even if James Cottingham can win the championship, Johnny, of course, cannot. Darren Leung and Dan Harper, then, they are the people that have got to do the chasing. They also come into this race with the extra long compensation pit stop time by dint of winning at Brands Hatch. That was great for them in terms of points for the championship. Not so great was the knock-on effect coming into this race.
Yeah, and we've never seen a car with maximum compensation time win this race ever, so that is really difficult for them. The saving grace is if you do get a safety car period around that pit stop window, that obviously the compensation time becomes a little bit negated really. So they've got a chance, but it's definitely an outside one. But I think Darren Leung and Dan Harper are really approaching it with a positive but aggressive attitude, and I think that's going to really show at the start of tomorrow's race.
So it is then aboard the number 78 Aston Martin, the Lamborghini I should say, at the front of the queue. Sandy Mitchell, Lamborghini factory driver, who is going to go. This is where it gets really tasty now, because the pros behind the wheel, all of them needing to help their AMs, all of them, of course, with their own reputations to protect and preserve and enhance as well. So Sandy Mitchell for Barwell at the front of the queue, Will Tregurtha behind him, Raffaele Marciello, then what have we got? Callum McLeod, I think, next in the queue. Also, 88 McLaren's going to be an interesting one. Johnny Edgar, new to GT racing, but a race winner in FIA Formula 3, returning to racing after some time off with Crohn's disease, but an interesting switch of disciplines at the end of the year.
Yeah, it'll be a huge change for him from an F3 car into a GT3 car. The lucky thing for him is the McLaren is a carbon tub, so it's very stiff.
Yeah.
So it'll give him some feeling similar to an F3 car, whereas like the Mercedes that we look at, standard aluminium honeycomb chassis, does just flex a bit more, and that would be an alien feeling for a driver. So I think he's got a good chance potentially of really showing what he can do if he were to transition from single-seaters to the much more interesting GT world. Just looking at tyres wise, the Lamborghinis are leaving on wet tyres. We saw the 2Cs cars on slicks. We're seeing ABBA leave on wet. So Ross Gunn on slick, so his teammate put it on pole on wet tyres, and he's decided he wants slick. So we're going to see a real interesting battle. This is actually a great illustration. Same cars, different teams. Neary in the all green car on wets, Raffaele Marciello on slicks, and that is a pretty illustration of confidence via tyre.
Well, I was going to say, Sam Neary clearly has confidence the way he went storming out onto the circuit, but he also knows that he's got to get on with it because he wants that time in. If the road dries sufficiently for slicks to work, at least he'll have that lap time in, and hopefully it'll be able to be protected. But he's absolutely on it, isn't he?
Yeah, that banker lap is so important. One, for the reason you've highlighted, but also we're seeing so many cars going off. Yellow flags meaning you can't improve in that sector. Red flags ultimately might not restart the session. So the wet time might not be the fastest in a perfect 10-minute qualifying, but if that's not the perfect 10-minute qualifying, then this banker lap that you're going to do in the first third of it could be the one that actually starts to count towards your overall qualifying position. He jumps over the curbs there. Track limits are going to be an interesting contention. Our camera there really shows how much you can cut and how advantageous it is depending on Peter Daly's view of it.
But if you just tuned in, you'd think this is his second flying lap, potentially. Not an out lap. I mean, he's absolutely on the money. So Sam Neary, who we know is very, very rapid anyway, he's been driving Lamborghinis this year within the Fanatec GT Endurance Cup. He comes up towards the start of a flying lap. Others are bailing for the pit lane. Yeah,
the Lambo's given up on the wets already, so Neary's got to put this lap in. He was pole position here when we had a wet qualifying in 2022, so we know he is quick in this car full stop, but we know he's definitely quick here in the wet. So he's going to put this lap in. Be interesting to see where he is. If it's anything 32 and below, it's definitely slicks. And I think that then we'll see him box at the end of the next lap. That's the kind of crossover point. That's 7 to 8 seconds off a slick lap time. We had qualifying earlier in the year here. Marciello was on pole on a 23.6, so that's kind of our yardstick for perfect conditions.
Did you see what Johnny Edgar went out on? Because he's gone quicker in the first sector than has Sam Neary in that McLaren.
Okay, he was definitely on slicks.
Right, so, okay, interesting.
The ABBA guys should actually rip the plaster off quickly and box this lap. Get rid of the vanity. It's obvious that slicks, if they're quicker in sector 1 already, you need to be on those fully slick tyres.
Unless they keep him out to at least get a lap in and then box, but we'll see. I mean, Sam Neary with the car by the scruff of the neck, you can almost hear it whimpering. He's got it up on the curb and on the dirt coming out of the S's, down now towards the Melbourne hairpin. He's the pioneer in all of this, but others are doing good sector times as well, such as Callum McLeod, such as I say, Johnny Edgar. So now the run up towards Goddard's then. Does number 8 Mercedes stay out? Does it come in? Let's see. And Sam Neary is going to go for a time, so at least they'll get a banker lap in. He'll break the beam, and this is going to be the target then from Sam Neary, 1:34.335. And that also, of course, with the first double effort, puts them to the top briefly on aggregate. Raffaele Marciello then goes through, but to the top goes 88 McLaren briefly, and then Callum McLeod goes even faster. So the best lap, 1:31.145. Number 3 Mercedes, Callum McLeod fastest. Slick's the way to go.
Yeah, definitely. It's close though, isn't it? When you think we watched that Neary lap, he was on it, but he's still 3.5 off. But the Slick guys now all within a tenth or two in the top 4. So Neary's got to get into the pitch. McLeod's sliding all over the place there, looking for grip.
Every car that crosses the line seems to go quickest of all. Marcus Clutton now has gone to the top. What you're looking at there is the combined time, so the lap in this session added to the lap in Q1, but in this isolated session, 1 minute 30 from Marcus Clutton is the fastest, and Jules Gounon down at the Melbourne hairpin now.
Yeah, you raise a really, really good point about the last car being through, being the fastest. So you'd want your engineer on the pit wall to be on it, working out, I want to cross the finish line with 2 or 3 seconds remaining, so I'm the last guy out. And my really bad math at that, I think it'll be the 78 car of Mitchell. It's quite an easy one to work out here. We had 6 minutes remaining, lap time's 1 minute 30, so I think he's going to be the last car at the moment to take the flag, basically, and that at the moment could be as much as 2 or 3 tenths of a lap as the track just improved naturally.
Right, Dan Harper has gone quickest in Q2, 1 minute 30, 4 tenths up on anybody else. Philip Ellis, 7th. That means that the BMW is 2nd on aggregate and the Mercedes is 5th. And Jules Gounon, with his best efforts, now Ross Gunn with his efforts, puts the Aston Martin back to the top on aggregate.
Yeah, but it was still 6 seconds off a normal dry time, so it shows you how much the track's improving, and it's improving at a fast rate of knots. I'd also be pretty tempted, as Mitchell is on 2 purples. I think he's in this last sector now, obviously, coming into the last corner. What's he going to give us as a yardstick to give us something? It could be almost an option to come in for another set of brand new slicks that are even hotter and go again.
A 1:28 means that he's quicker by 9 tenths of a second than anybody else, and that puts the Lamborghini 5th on aggregate now. So Sandy Mitchell going well. This is Dan Harper coming into Goddard's then. So number 91 BMW, Dan Harper, personal bests rather than absolutes, goes through and goes up to 2nd on aggregate, 4th in the session.
Yeah, so the time we've obviously got, the order we've got on the screen up here is the aggregate one. So we're looking at the TSL timing of the session. Gounon's lap, enough to take them to overall pole position. So he's absolutely on it at the moment. It is so tight on the combined times. Neary we saw leaving on a brand new set of slicks. So he's actually on that strategy that I'd find quite interesting. He's only going to get 2 flyers, but he's going to have the best of the track on the best tyres. You can see the drivers are having to give up finding space. They're just flat out, just trying to churn the lap time that they can possibly get out of the conditions that's giving them the grip that they're not sure what they've got.
Right, Sandy Mitchell, fastest in Q2, doing personals and absolutes on this lap. This is Dan Harper, who is currently 6th in Q2, 3rd on aggregate. Clear road ahead of him as well. Coming down towards the S is the car quivering a little bit under braking, rattles it over the curb. Ginetta Junior champion, Carrera Cup GB champion. Sandy Mitchell is looking rapid as well, as over the timing line he goes, stays fastest in Q2 and is now 5th on aggregate. What about the BMW, I wonder?
Yeah, you can see it squirming on traction. I think that's the weakness of that BMW. It's so good aero-wise. You can see it again, just nervous there on the way in, but it's got not much weight over the rear axle of where the engine is obviously positioned, squirming along. But like I thought, Mitchell, as we see Sam Neary stop there, I think he's actually taken the national track. I don't think he's even done Sector 3. He's done a really good job of being in a safe place. He's probably just doing a power cycle. He's out of the way. I'm not even sure it needs a yellow flag, to be honest, where the car is. It looks closer in that shot, but that is way off the track. Hopefully he can restart that and get some laps in on slicks.
2 minutes and change on the clock. So there's the car that's quickest on aggregate. Number 1 Mercedes, Jules Gounon, at the wheel of it at the moment, and he is a 10th up on Ross Gunn. We're looking to see whether Sam Neary can rejoin. This is Dan Harper in the meantime. Now on this lap, number 91 BMW has done an absolute best in the first sector. So Dan Harper looking very, very strong indeed here, and he's actually bought himself a clear road.
He's done really well. He's got a whole sector in front of him, fully clear. 27 cars, probably 20 seconds ahead of him. You can see it just going through the chicane. But the next lap will be his last flyer. He's almost caught this a little bit wrong. He's going to cross with a minute to go, so he's going to be one of the first cars to take the checkered flag. Whereas, like I said, Sandy Mitchell, the Harper car is so nervous under braking. Dan must be so confident in that car. I assume he's quite low on the ABS settings, which is allowing each tyre to kind of lock up, but ultimately give him the best braking performance.
Just quickly to say, Philip Ellis has brought the James Cottingham Mercedes up to 4th on aggregate, therefore to line up alongside the BMW, unless Dan Harper's lap catapults him up the order, and it does not, because he lost down in the last sector, so he stays 3rd.
And this is going to be his last lap now. It's all Gunnar, which was shocked to him, looked like he was pretty sideways on entry. Like I said, all these guys starting their last flyers. Historically, we're used to the tyres dropping off after the first lap sometimes, second flyer. But with the conditions today, they're obviously hanging on a little bit longer, and the track is improving to negate that loss. Mitchell, purple sector 1. Like I said, I think he's going to get another flyer at the end of this one. He's my tip to be fastest in this session, but he needs to find 9/10 to get up to 5th place. That's where the combined aggregate qualifying really starts to hurt you if you've had a poor quali 1.
Sure. Ross Gunn goes through, and he's back to the top of the times on the combined time by now 1.6 seconds. Sandy Mitchell is still the fastest within Q2, and the flag is imminent. So this is Ross Gunn heading downhill. Sandy Mitchell looked 2 absolute bests. Road drying, road getting quicker all the time. This is Dan Harper, who was down in sector 1. He was a little bit better in sector 2. Sandy Mitchell lost out in the last sector, but the lap was still the best of the session, 1:27.071. Back on board with the BMW.
Yeah, and he's going to be the first to take the checkered flag, so let's see what he's got. The team will be telling him this is your last lap, so if you've kind of tried everything, you just throw it all out there. You should stay to the right, go shortest distance to the line. He breaks the line, does he improve? He does, and that takes him up to 2nd overall. That is really important for the championship.
But it also is rather dependent on what Jules Gounon can do, because Jules was up in sector 1 but down in sector 2. So does this get number 1 Mercedes back onto the front row of the grid? We'll find out in a moment as he breaks the beam. The answer is no, he stays 3rd. And look, also Abby Eaton is up to 4th on aggregate. That pushes Philip Ellis's Mercedes onto the 3rd row.
Yeah, Ellis is on a lap at the moment, but he wasn't improving in his first sector. He is up in the 2nd. Ross Gunn, his teammate, was on pole position, and he's done a really strong job. Only 5th in his session, but at the moment, aggregate pole position.
Ross Gunn goes through and is the fastest again on aggregate, and the margin is 1.5 seconds over Dan Harper. Now, what can Philip Ellis do on his last lap? Down in sector 1, improved in sector 2. Bear in mind, he's never raced here before, so every lap he's learning. Comes up towards the line, goes through, stays 5th.
That's interesting, isn't it? We saw that Cottingham was the place behind his championship rival, Darren Leung, but Harper has made that gap now 2 cars, so suddenly it swings in their favour. And like you were saying, now what's in Cottingham's mind? Is he going to go defensive? I think his bluff's been called. He's got to go aggressive at the start tomorrow to get nearer this 91 car. Mega job by Dan Harper there. 2nd in his session, but only 2/10 behind Mitchell. So great job by Mitchell, but unfortunately the way that first session went, it really split it. Go for the super slow-mo, seeing how good this BMW is over curbs, getting it as tight as he can to that tyre stack. You couldn't get cigarette paper. Look at the oversteer, nice rotation. Dan looks super chilled in there. Yeah. Track limits beautifully done, and then full gas on the way out. But yeah, that car looked rather lively, didn't it, through there? So Dan's done a good job. Getting congratulations from his team here. We're going straight to Parc Fermé, and the car will be checked for all its legalities and stuff. But mega job by Ross Gunn. Like I said, 6th overall in the end in this session. But Andrew Howard doing that call to go on to wets was a really wise one, and they're starting from pole position tomorrow.
And there is Sam Neary, who ends up slowest in Q2. Despite all the zealotry at the start of the session, there was clearly a problem, and he wasn't able to get the car going again. It had come to rest on the exit of the old chicane on the national circuit, but not able to get it back in the session. So that puts them 14th at the not quite back of GT3 grid, because Martin Plowman, Michael O'Brien and Chris Froggatt never got out in the McLarens with assorted bits of damage from earlier on, and John Ferguson and Raffaele Marcello only being in the combined classification 13th Lello, only 11th in Q2. So it's Ross Gunn and Andrew Howard's car that will start on pole. Andrew Howard will be the start driver ahead of Dan Harper and Darren Leung. Jules Gounon under his Andorran licence these days, and Ian Logie 3rd. And a great effort by Abby Eaton and John Seal for 4th. Philip Ellis and championship leader James Cottingham 5th, ahead of Johnny Edgar, British GT debut also, like Philip Ellis. Miguel Ramos, they are 6th. Sandy Mitchell and Sean Balfe 7th, ahead of Marcus Clapton and Morgan Tilbrook. Then Marvin Kirchhofer parachuted in to replace Rob Bell, with Mark Radcliffe 9th, and James Kell and Ian Campbell 10th. James Kell being having had money taken off him in FP2 for brake testing another driver. Will Tregurtha and Mark Sanson ahead of Callum McLeod and Mike Price. Only 13 for Raffaele Marcello and John Ferguson from Sam Neary and Dad Richard. Martin Plowman and Mark Smith next from Michael O'Brien and Simon Orange, and Chris Froggatt and Kevin Say never got in a time. Bryn.
Well, Andrew, it seems like an age that we were talking tyres with you, but it's not that long ago. You went out there and banked a decent time, didn't you? And it all came down to you at the end, but Ross did a pretty sterling job with some nasty tyres. Talk us through that.
Well, the reason we changed twice was because the slicks had a horrendous vibration on them. Literally, the dashboard was vibrating so much you couldn't see it. So I went on the wets, fine, worked. So he's had to go out on the slicks that were vibrating, so all credit, which is why he was struggling to start with. So amazing lap by Ross, absolutely amazing. A nice send-off for the old girl, it's her last race.
Absolutely is. Well, look, good luck tomorrow. Thanks, Andrew.
Thank you. Cheers.
Now the track is already live for the cars heading onto the circuit for GT4 Q1. Now GT4 is up for grabs as well, where Jack Brown and Charles Clark lead by 10.5 points from Michael Johnson and Chris Selkeld, and they're 6 up on the Eric Evans, Matt Cowley Mustang, and mathematically in touch as well, Ian Goff and Tom Wrigley 4th. And there are 2 of those championship contenders, the BMW number 14, the number 90 McLaren. Now, Joe, these are slightly slower cars and a slightly drier road than we had at the start of the session itself.
Yeah, so they've been given the fortunate position of seeing the qualifying unfold with the GT3, so every car that's left that's gone past us has been on slicks, so yeah, they'll be there. They might have had that advantage to make a bit of a setup change, because it is obviously a bit lower grip than you were thinking, so you would naturally soften the car off, let that car roll and try and find grip, rather than if it was fully dry and like we had in the first round here at Donington. Super fast lap times with this new surface, but yeah, you can see the brake zone now fully dry, but it is only one line still, isn't it? So if you're going to have to overtake a car, the penalty of that is going to be even more than usual in qualifying, because you're going to have to be really, really slow. Go on board with the Optimum GT4 car. Had such a big GT4 lead with a couple of rounds ago, and they've just had such bad luck. They've actually changed cars, so Optimum owned 2 of these Artura GT4s, and they back-to-back tested them a couple of weeks ago and slightly preferred this car. The reason being is this was the car I actually raced at the start of the year, so obviously I've made it better, but they have swapped, but they did do a gearbox in FP1,
right.
So the luck that they've been having has followed them across the chassis as they start their first flying lap.
Whereas that BMW has got stronger and stronger as the season has gone on, hasn't it? They had that win in Portimao, Chris Selkeld's first victory, and this is, as we stand at the moment...
He had a huge slide there through the right of Hollywood. You could hear him just lift, and I think the lift actually instigated the slide, and he then jumped on the brakes. So on board, that would have been a big old moment. You can see how much time he's lost to that McLaren that he was close to at the start of the lap. So again, this is where being a bronze driver is that little bit harder. You know, the Silvers have that extra time in the pit stops tomorrow, but these conditions will actually make a big difference positively for the Silver pairings.
Of course, what we don't know for the race is if and when safety cars might be deployed, because that's going to have a big, big impact, especially for those that have the penalties to serve or the extra compensation time, if you prefer, in the pit stops. A safety car after the pit window, of course, bunches everybody up and it's all bets off. Yeah, safety car first in is great for the Pro-Am because it stops that Silver that should be quicker than the Am get away. Safety car in the second stint, better for the Silvers who've had to serve a longer pit stop. So it's a real Jekyll and Hyde as we go back on board. First flying lap for Jack Brown. Car looks really nice and stable. They've reset the delta, so I can't actually see on from his dash what sort of lap time we're on for at the moment, but I'm sure he's going to go for a sort of a quick one while the tyres are hot, because I think these tyres are actually going to go off potentially just because they're not generating enough heat. And he goes P2 on a 1:39.0. These cars have got less aero than GT3, but how does a GT4 car work the tyres differently? They're normally a narrower tyre, so there's more pressure per square inch on the tyre than in GT3, and they're sometimes heavier, like for like these cars. So again, it can work the tyre, but you are going slower. So it's a bit of a hard one to find a hard and fast rule which way they work out. Just looking at a dry qualifying time from last time we were here, we were in the 32s as we have a spin for Ron Johnson there at the last corner. So hopefully we can get that going and
doesn't impede people on their flying laps coming into the Goddard hairpin.
Yeah, Ron Johnson returning to the championship. We saw him years ago in the Corvette, amongst other things. And that car facing the wrong way. It also had a spin in FP2. Josh Rowledge, in the meantime, looking to post perhaps the target time. At the moment, we've got a 1:38.6 out of aboard number 23, Josh Miller. But Josh Rowledge coming then in the DTO McLaren. Looks great, that car in that livery. Up towards the line. And McLaren's having a pretty torrid time in GT3 in qualifying. Looking a lot better in GT4.
Yeah, this new Artura is just going to really benefit in these conditions. And why is that? It's just a new car, so it has all the updated systems. It's running Bosch ABS traction control, so there'll be all the latest incarnations that Bosch offer. So it'll just be more usable, more settings that you can use, whereas that slightly older Aston, which we're seeing being replaced next year, will be using that older system, but it does just go P1. So it still shows you what I know about that. But I am amazed how much we're off. Still 6 seconds off of fully dry time. So I think we're going to still look for another couple of seconds of lap time improvement throughout this session. I would have thought pole's got to be a 35 something in about 4.5 minutes time.
Okay, let's see whether the road dries out enough, as here you're on board then now with Jack Brown, working the car hard, really working it hard down through the Kramer curves. Lap times are improving, 4th gear for the old hairpin.
Yeah, sorry, that's a fully dry gear, so he's obviously happy with that. Just looking at his dashboard, he was 2.5 tenths up at that point. You see Rowley's gone purple, but then had to overtake Ron Johnson, who has got that Aston Martin going again. So again, traffic's going to be a big thing here. Everyone's trying to find their space, but there are just bigger disparities between the drivers, ones that are confident and ones that are not. So you might set up a clear lap and then all of a sudden you catch a car, and I think minimum it's going to cost you 5 or 6 tenths, as we see Rowledge flashing his headlights, trying to get Ian Duggan out of the way, but Ian's within his right because he's on a push lap. That's the problem in qualifying. No one wants to yield.
Up to 6th, somebody else returning to British GT, Ben Collins, who I think has been away for about 18 seasons. He was last seen in the Embassy Racing Chevrolet Corvette, and Ben up now in the Ginetta to 6th in this session. As far as the top time is concerned, Josh Miller looking good with, on this lap, another personal and absolute best. He's already 9 tenths up the road anyway, so the Aston looking really, really strong, breaks the beam, and that lap is a 36.7, 1.2 seconds quicker than anybody else, and a 1:36 now gets you to where you want them to be.
Yeah, exactly. It's mega lap time, and again, the front engine Aston Martin, the front engine just gives the driver a better feel of what the turning is and how much speed you can take in, whereas a mid-engine car like that McLaren, it's just a little bit number. You don't have that load over the front axle, so it's kind of a bit better in these mixed conditions, I think, to be in a front engine car. We see that a lot, don't we, in GT3, of the Mercedes kind of being dominant in these mixed conditions. And I think that's what Miller's doing really well. Ginetta, another front engine car. You see 56 car get a mega run. Freddie Tomlinson there getting down the inside. Hopefully he can get back to the dry line. All the Ginettas grouping up. 2 different teams. You can just see he just touched the white line under braking. It basically confused the ABS. It went, the front left's got no grip, and that's why we actually saw the car lock up. Freddie had a big old moment and did well to save that, but all of these guys now have only got a couple of laps. Again, another big lock up there. You can just see the ABS struggling to kind of compute. I've got grip one side but not the other, and that's the conditions that are being offered to the car.
Now another front engine grunt and go car has gone fastest. Eric Evans' Mustang number 61 has now gone to the top by 64 thousandths of a second. Number 23 Aston Martin here is second, but should go back to the top this time because Josh Miller has done a personal and an absolute best, so he's got to be now in the mid 136s. Let's see. Also improving on this lap is Jack Brown to try and haul himself up from 4th. We've got 90 seconds on the clock. Do we have an Aston Martin back onto pole position? Yes, we do. That's a 1:36.0, so 7 tenths quicker. The road's getting drier all the time now.
Yeah, what's Brown got? He's about to cross the line for his last lap. Goes across 36.9, so 9 tenths off there. We've got to find a little bit. He's really good in sector 1. We keep seeing a purple sector 1, rolls in a load of speed. You can see on the dash, the far left, I can see the delta going up, so he's going to be a tenth slower, I think, in this first sector. As we go to Eric Evans, currently second. What's he got? That Mustang we saw so strong at the last round. I think Academy have really had a bit of a break in the BOP and have just managed to eke out the last bit of performance of this car that we know is being replaced next year as well.
So the Mustang makes a great noise, this car. Growls its way out of the Melbourne hairpin, and Eric Evans was a little little bit down in the middle sector on this lap, so don't necessarily expect an improvement. Matt Cowley will take it over for Q2, and again, of course, it's that aggregation of the times that will determine the grid as the Mustang sings over the line, stays second then. Ben Collins up to fourth in the Ginetta, and Freddie Tomlinson up to sixth in his Ginetta G56 now.
Just trying to look at the sector, see pretty much everyone is on a green sector. Be the nature of the circuit. We're used to qualifying kind of petering out sometimes. There's a big old slide for Evans there through cradle curves. It'll be 125, 130 miles an hour there. So that will wake him up rather nicely. As we see a spin again for Ron Johnson out that last corner. I don't know if it's a little bit harder. You can see it's in the shade there. It's probably just a little bit wetter than everywhere else because the sunlight isn't there to help dry the circuit. Does a good job of getting out of the way. Actually, Miller was boxed there on his last lap. He had a purple sector 1, but only a rather average sector 2, so he's bailed out of it.
I wonder as well whether, because he would have come across a spinning Ron Johnson, he thought, well, there's no chance of an improvement getting past him, might as well. So you're right, he had lost time. Josh Rowledge up to third then and doing an absolute best first sector, number 36 McLaren. That's the other Mustang of Will Moore. Slightly different colour scheme and a bit of a twitch as he comes out of the Melbourne hairpin. Will Moore accelerates now towards Goddard. So yeah, flag out at the end of what's Q3 effectively, but GT4 Q1. Where are the improvements going to come from? Well, this Mustang should get itself one place up the order you would have thought. A couple of attempts to find to jump ahead of Ben Collins, and he does indeed go into the top 6. Will Moore, then number 62 Mustang goes through. In all of that, number 14 BMW, Michael Johnston, only 11th.
Yeah, they really struggle there. As we look at Josh Rowledge, purple and the green, this could be a pole lap. I said it needs to be a 35. Big slide under braking, lock the rear there. Is he going to get the car in? Just about gets it to the apex. What's he got? Has he got a 35 in the bag to get him onto pole position? He does not. A 30.013, 3 thousandths off pole position. Frustrating, but at least with the aggregate, it's not as important because obviously 3 thousandths is going to be now combined when he hands over to Aston Miller, and the Aston Martin obviously is going to have to try and fight them off.
But 3 thousandths of a second, around 2.5 miles of a lap, is nothing at all. That illustrates how well the BOP, the balanced performance, works, but also just how incredibly competitive this championship is. The fast lane is already open for the cars for Q2, so that's another aspect. You were talking about Josh Miller bailing. Of course, in doing that, buys the team a bit more time. These drivers that took the checkered flag, then do an in-lap, you know, they've lost some of that time to get the next driver in before the final part of qualifying begins.
Yeah, really true. The GT4 cars all have 5 wheel nuts on each one, so it's a slower pit stop. GT3 not as important. GT4 it is.
So this is how we stand at the moment then. It is Josh Miller ahead of Josh Rowledge, and then Jack, call me Josh Brown, third ahead of Freddie Tomlinson, Zach Meakin, with the Team Parker McLaren up to 5th at the end. So Eric Evans, who'd looked really good really in the last couple of minutes, got elbowed back to 6th ahead of Ben Collins and Will Moore, Ian Goff, and then behind was the James Townsend Ginetta. Harry George ahead of Michael Johnston, then Kerry Jundu ahead of Ian Duggan, Carl Cavers, Ed McDermott and Ron Johnson. Josh Miller then, quickest by the whopping margin of 3 thousandths of a second. He's with Bryn Lucas.
You know what, Josh, it seems to be a story, almost a broken record of the track and how it's coming to drivers, and you seem to go quicker and quicker lap after lap there.
Yeah, look, the conditions were changing like every 30 seconds. You'd approach a different corner, there'd be a completely different line, and you'd see the dry line beginning to form. It was all about placing that outside wheel on that line and just hooking the lap up. You know, certain parts, that's the part of the nature of this track. It dries like different areas of track dry like different speeds. She'll have like sector 2 normally stays quite wet as well as sector 3, whereas the first couple of corners are always quite dry, so it's fine on the slick. So it's all about just piecing it together, being calm and collective and really smooth.
For yourself and for Seb, I mean, this season hasn't gone to plan at all. 3 podiums, so it's not been a terrible season, but on the back of last year, the expectation was really high. I suppose for you two, finishing on a high would be the ultimate dream. Yeah,
as you said, it hasn't quite gone to plan. I mean, you can't complain about the podiums we've had. We've had some successes over the last few races, which have been great. But there's been a few times which just haven't meant to be. But, you know, if we can end this year on a high, it makes everything easier going to next year and just leaves you on a positive note. So we'll see what we can do in this qualifying session now with Seb, and then hopefully we'll be in a good position for the race tomorrow.
Best of luck, Josh.
Thank you.
So Q2 for GT4 is within a minute of getting underway, and there in super slow-mo is Josh Miller riding the curb, and the concentration on the face as he skims the car over the curb, keeps one wheel just the right side, two wheels just the right side of the white line. But a really good lap done there to put that car by the modest margin of 3 thousandths ahead of the rest.
Yeah, and he was in control of that quality, wasn't it? Between him and the Ford to start with, the Ford dropped off. That car looks strong, so that will be positive for the R Racing guys. Like you said, he boxed a lap early, and that's given his teammate the chance to get out there first, so Hopkins can see that track, see where it goes, but also have the best chance of not having any traffic for his first couple of flyers anyway.
Looking good for Aston Martin right now, isn't it? But GT3 and GT4 poles provisionally, as now out goes 23. So the final 10 minutes of qualifying. A lot seems to be happening in 10 minutes. You don't think it gives you that much time, but all 3 sessions thus far have been very, very lively indeed. There is Dan Vaughan, this time in the Team Parker Racing run McLaren. Of course, they switched from that rather recalcitrant Porsche Cayman to the McLaren from Portimao onwards. And with the road even drier, should be even faster, out they all pour. But once more, finding clear track space, absolutely crucial to this.
Yeah, really difficult. And you can see there, it looked like Vaughan was trying to get away from those Century BMWs in front to find space, but Downbert behind him wants to fill that space now. So you get stuck between these guys and you want to fill your own space and basically end up defending on this outlap more than you would in a race to keep that space yours. You never want to give that up, because then you've got to go and try and find your own track space again. And Darren, what he will be doing in that Mercedes will be pushing Vaughan into him, and then at the last moment at the last corner will suddenly back off and create his own space. You're kind of bullying Vaughan into it, although it looks like Vaughan has given him the space there, so it's potentially going to sort of go, you know what, I think you might be quicker, I don't mind following you for a lap or two. But yeah, track position is such a short moment. See Bert really working the car through there, just trying to get a feel of it. This outlap really is exploring where the grip's at and what you're going to get away with when you attack it next time by on your first fly.
The story for GT3 may not be done either, because the message line on the timing screens is now saying GT3 qualifying is under investigation. Which specific element has not yet been declared, but GT3 qualifying is being looked at, so it may well be that what we've seen does not necessarily translate into the grid. Of course, the cars have a warm-up session tomorrow, after which the grid is going to be published, and so across the timing line now onto a flying lap go the GT4 cars for their second element of qualifying. There is number 18 then, Dan Vaughan at the wheel of the Team Parker Racing run McLaren. And at the end of this next lap we'll start to get a proper idea of times and the combined order.
Yeah, just looking at the cars, they're still struggling for grip through that Hollywood part of the cradle curves, which is where you want to keep the car over to the right to open it up. I just wonder if the next 7.5 minutes are going to dry up anymore. Just trying to guess what I think the lap times are going to be, pole position towards the end. You would have thought we're going to find another 2.5 seconds, so it should kind of take us into the mid-34s potentially. Obviously all the sectors are coming up now. We're starting to get understanding. Get a great shot of that Aston Martin there. You see the front right tyre, how much camber it was running. That's definitely a bit of a dry setup there. Normally you'd run a little less camber in these sort of conditions to give yourself more contact patch, thus more grip when you haven't quite got the energy. Close to track limits there, wasn't it? It's really difficult when you watch it at live speed to see if they're keeping a wheel over that white line and on the track that's being mandated to them. Aston Martin looks great on the brakes there, loads of diving at the front, really gets down low. Just put his outside wheels on the damp bit, a little bit on exit. Sometimes there isn't a width of dry bit, so you always want to keep your outside wheels on the driest part. Does a much better job of that at the Goddard's hairpin. It definitely doesn't look like there's a dry bit from the apex to exit, just where the shadow's being cast from the hospitality suite there, but breaks the line to do the first lap, 37.9. So nearly 2 seconds exactly off what his teammate did, so he's getting his eye in. He now needs to get straight on it before everyone else gets the advantage of the new tyre here.
And there you've got Michael Broadhurst in number 12 Mercedes, and in 31 having his GT4 and, well, British GT debut at least, Tom Ingram, who was last year's British Touring Car champion. If you follow the British Touring Car Championship on television, you'll know all about Tom Ingram, because he's a very, very rapid, very spectacular driver. He's old mates with Ron Johnson, and Ron said, "Do you fancy racing this weekend?" And Ting said, "Yeah, why not?" So whether this is the start of a GT career, I rather doubt, because he's still got more titles to win in the British Touring Car Championship, but I think he'd be a very handy GT racer, and he was enjoying himself this morning, that's for sure.
Yeah, amazing that he enjoys driving an Aston Martin more than a Hyundai taxi. It's a surprise, that, isn't it? But I caught up with Tom earlier, actually, and he was loving it. But first time sat in the car was Thursday, so he's new to it. He's been rapid in the free practice sessions, but still learning the car. He got in and saw the ice flake, the snowflake on the dashboard. Oh, that's good. It's like a cold driving mode. And he's like, no, that's aircon. He's like, okay, great. So that is his experience in the car.
Sure.
Luckily, his driving abilities make up for the lack of knowledge in the car.
And in a way, he's going back to his early days because he came out of Ginetta racing, which was rear-wheel drive, and he's now gone fastest. How about that? His first flying lap in a GT4 qualifying session. Tom Ingram goes to the top of the times, 1:35.444. If you can drive anything, can't you?
Exactly, and he's proven that. That is what is great about that. He's been in a front-wheel drive car winning one of the hardest touring car championship in the world, and it's just been put on his head. The power is coming from the right axle, the rear now, and he's still able to be on pole position by 0.6 of a second as well. So that's great to see. And it's going to be an interesting race for him because obviously Ron we saw struggling in Q1. He's then going to inherit that car and try and drag it up the order, getting right in the mix of cars like this one that are hunting for a championship.
Yeah, number 90 now has got Charles Clark at the wheel of it. Another McLaren that we ought to have a look at is number 7. It's got Tom Gamble, McLaren factory driver at the wheel. He's been brought in to share with Kavijundu for this weekend, but we'll get Charles Clark across the line. Seb Hopkins then was the fastest. Matt Nicol-Jones has now gone to the top in Q2. He's gone quicker than Tom Ingram by 0.121 of a second. Charles Clark goes through. So number 90, 1:40.4, a sort of start-up lap. That Mike Simpson's Ginetta goes through as well to be fastest in Q2.
Yeah, into the 34s now, so nearly half a second quicker than that lap from Matt Nicol-Jones. Mike, fastest salesman in the world, I think he calls himself, for Ginetta. Loves this car, doing a mega job with it as well. And we've seen it really start to shine, especially at that Toro Verde team when they split 2 AM drivers and brought Mike on board to race with James Townsend. Really, really quick, and we saw them dominate at Snetzen in the qualifying there. So what's Mike got? He's purple in Sector 1 already. Car looks great, and look how much space he's got as we go to Matt Nicol-Jones, still in second position. Car making a lovely noise still. Not improved any of his sectors this lap, so hopefully they haven't worked the tyre too hard. You can see how much they worked the steering wheel, that old Mustang. Big old steering wheel in it, but car looks good, and still got 3 minutes remaining, so it's quite hard at the moment, isn't it, to call where this is going. But Mike Simpson, that Ginetta, absolutely flying along.
Absolutely right. Now the one to watch really is going to be number 90, Charles Clark, because at the moment that is the car that is at the bottom of the Q2 times. Through goes 62 then. Matt Nicol-Jones up to 3rd in Q2, up to 3rd on aggregate. So what about number 90 McLaren then? That's 36 McLaren first up, which is now Aston Miller on the wheel of it, another of the Ginetta Junior graduates, and he's got that by the scruff of the neck as well, hasn't he?
Yeah, really hustling it there. Ginetta getting out of his way really kindly to give him some good track position. How's the car look under brakes? Doesn't dive, does it, as much as the Aston Martin with that front engine we were talking about. Traction good. What's he going to have? Clark has come across the line in the meantime, but still hasn't really improved. Must have lost it to track limits because his best laps are 1:40, but his last laps are 35.8. So timekeepers have deleted that lap and not put it up there. He is green in Sector 1, but he's got a big ask now with only 2 minutes remaining, 2 flying laps. What's he got? Aston Miller crosses the line, and he is still not particularly in the sharp end, is he? I'm actually struggling to see him on the timing screen. He's that low down. We're losing a lot of time. P11 at the moment. A lot of times are being deleted for track limits, and I do think it's the chicane where we're seeing them starting to get a bit greedier with cutting that right-hand element of it.
So Charles Clark then has had 2 warnings, and then after that time start to be taken away. So he's at the foot of the times within this session, and on the aggregate 15th, and that's not the place you want to start from to win a championship, is it?
It's really not. I'm actually just looking at the timing screen. I'm surprised when you look at the cars that are there. One surprise is that the McLarens aren't higher. Wheeler's just gone P1, so in a Ginetta, sister car to Mike Simpson that we're seeing on screen. So it's Ginetta, Aston, Ginetta, Mercedes, Ford, BMW. We haven't got a Ginetta in the top, McLaren in the top 10 at the moment. And these are conditions that I thought they would do okay in. and that's a big problem for the Optimum one.
Right, Charles Clark's now gone second on aggregate, so finally he's there, he's got the pace, and he's done a lap that stands. Mike Simpson with 3 purples, the absolutely perfect lap, has got himself to 6th on aggregate, and the time is half a second quicker than anybody else, 1:34.136 within Q2. Over the line goes Michael Broadhurst ahead of Tom Ingram. So Tom switching from Accelerate to Stuart Hall's team for GT purposes this weekend. Over the line there, 36, Josh Rowledge. Now Aston Miller at the wheel of the McLaren, and that is still at the top of the times on the combined sessions together. We've got just over 10 seconds to go, and now it's 23 Aston that goes back to the top on aggregate, because Seb Hopkins is now ahead by 1/5 of a second.
Yeah, now he's got 2/10 over that Miller. McLaren having a big slide up the old hairpin. This will be Miller's last lap. How was his sector 1? It wasn't his best, but not too far off, so he'll still be pushing. Doesn't have to be green to be your best lap in any of the sectors. You can hook it up if it's close enough. Doesn't look like he's got any traffic there at all. Mike Simpson still improving, 2 purple sectors again. Is he about to do a lap that's got 6 purple sectors consecutively? Don't think I've seen that Miller all the way out wide. Wouldn't have lost him too much time, but he'll be questioning himself now as he hits the brakes, gives it a little weave to try and clear those tyres up. Don't think that was a particularly wise move. It actually looked like it unsettled the car, if anything. What's he got in sector 2 now? It's a little bit better, but still I think he's going to struggle. I think that Aston Martin combined has done a mega job, and I think it will stay on pole position now.
It's going to be a really topsy-turvy order in GT4 tomorrow, isn't it? Because you've seen in this session how there is a real difference between some of the driver combinations pace, just the way that the car is in well up the order in this second part of qualifying, but way down on aggregate. Let's just get Aston Miller across the line then, because 36 drops to second and will stay second as he goes through. So Seb Hopkins then, with Josh Miller looking as though it's going to be pole position in GT4. Mike Simpson and Tom Ingram and Michael Broadhurst, the top 3 within Q2. That's what I mean about the difference in driver A to driver B pace. You know, Ingram at the bottom on the combined times, but second on his own efforts.
Yeah, it really is. And just going back to that Miller one, like, he's a second off pole position. That's something that we haven't seen Miller or DTOB for a long time. They've really got on top of that McLaren, so I hope they don't have a problem, but they're still starting second overall. But I'm surprised by that Q2 time, as we see the Academy Mustangs running in formation. That's what gave me a heart attack at Brands Hatch when they did that at the finish. But yeah, 4 amazing qualifying sessions. But like you're saying, I think with the mixed conditions, we've seen a bit of a topsy-turvy order. So I think the start tomorrow is going to be dynamite and fireworks, because there's some cars that are potentially out of position with that driver starting it. That's the interesting bit.
And equally, there are those silvers that are going to have the longer pit stops, plus in some cases the compensation time, that really need to get away up the road, and they can ill afford a safety car within the first part of the race. So it really does have an awful lot on the table tomorrow, but because of the compensation times, maybe that BMW, which is a Pro-Am car and has less time to serve in the pits, looks stronger. Checkered flag has been taken by everybody. This is the in-lap, and that's the car that is going to start on GT4 pole position. Seb Hopkins and Josh Miller, the drivers. You can see how the road has been drying over the course of the session. Let's have a look at the results of GT4 then. This is the combined times. So Seb Hopkins and Josh Miller ahead of Aston Miller and Josh Rowledge, and then it's Charles Clark and Jack Brown, the GT4 Championship leaders, third. Dan Vaughan and Zach Meakin, fourth, so it's looking pretty good for McLaren, 3 out of the top 4. Ginetta, fifth, thanks to Tom Holland and Ben Collins. Then Will Moore and Matt Nicol-Jones, Mustang, ahead of the sister car of Eric Evans and Matt Cowley. Mike Simpson with James Townsend, 8th. Tom Wrigley and Ian Goff, 9th. And then it's Darren Burke and Harry George rounding out the top 10. Tom Gamble, he'll be a man to watch tomorrow, so also will Tom Ingram, and they are 13th and 17th, respectively, within the combined GT4 order. So warm-up session tomorrow will be the next time the cars are on track, and then the 2-hour Donington Decider starting at 1 o'clock tomorrow afternoon. But for now, calm descends on the pit lane, and all the drama seemed to be in GT3, didn't it, where there was quite a bit of damage, largely to McLaren's, it has to be said.
Yeah, I really hope the paddock guys can fix that car. Like I said, we're doing a big old hit, but they do have all overnight to fix it, and luckily the warm-up to check it is fixed as well. So we saw that car being up there, so it'd be a shame if it couldn't take the start.
So let's head down to the pit lane. Josh Miller, Seb Hopkins on the pole with Bryn.
It's kind of what you want, isn't it, really? Josh, yourself and Seb putting in pretty much representative times there and bagging yourself a pole position.
Yeah, look, you couldn't really ask for more. Like, delighted for the whole team. Everyone's done a mega job. We showed some strong pace all weekend long, especially in these tricky conditions. So, you know, really happy for everyone, and I'm excited to see what we can do tomorrow.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, put your cap on. I know you've got lovely hair, but just put your Pirelli cap on there. We'll obviously have the chat as well. For yourselves, we talked earlier on about finishing on such a high. It'd be great to finish the season with a decent finish, but you've got your work cut out with a silver time you've got to add on as well when it comes into your pit stop.
Yeah, it definitely makes it more challenging. And then, of course, on top of that, we got a success penalty from Brand. So it's going to make it tough to challenge for an outright win, but you know, I still think a podium is definitely in reach. So.
And you want rain?
We do want rain. I think we've shown some good pace. So, yeah, let's see how it goes.
Well done, so good luck tomorrow.
Thank you. Cheers.
So it's building up nicely, isn't it, for tomorrow's 2-hour race. The forecast supposedly is that it's going to be dry tomorrow, but we'll wait and see whether that is going to be the case. And so the teams making their way back into the pit lane, the cars into the garages, but for some the hard work begins. So as I say, warm up tomorrow morning, and then we'll have the Donington Decider 1 o'clock tomorrow. And it promises to be another fascinating race, another fascinating way to round out the Intelligent Money British GT Championship year. Right, we'll see you tomorrow then. This is the car that's going to start on pole position. Andrew Howard and Ross Gans, Aston Martin. From Bryn Lucas in the pits, David Addison and Joe Osborne trackside. From Donington for today, it's goodbye.